Hi, Bruce Johnson here. And as you know, this is the time of the year when most business owners, entrepreneurs, CEOs, managing partners, executive directors, all of them are kind of engaged in this process of creating a strategic plan, a growth plan for the coming year. And that's a very good thing. The unfortunate problem, of course, is that the vast majority of companies are either plateaued or in decline, which means that they're making a number of mistakes in their plan. If they had the right plan, they'd be growing. But because they have the wrong plan, they're not growing. So what gives? What are some of the mistakes that people make when they're planning that make their companies plateau or go in decline? Well, here are 5 of them. They're not the only 5, but these are 5 very common mistakes that people make in planning. And if you want to create a great plan, you want to avoid all 5 of them. So here we go. Number 1, they make their plan too complicated. In other words, they've got graphs and charts and documents, and they've got a binder full of all these documents about this plan. And the problem with binders and bound plans is that they usually fit really nice on a shelf, okay? And then the next time they're looked at is usually the next September, October, November when they're reviewing last year's plan. Oh, what did we agree to? Oh, that's right. And then they pull them off. Well, you don't want to do that. You want to avoid that. What I do with my clients and what I encourage you in the program I have called Double It is you want to come up with a simple plan, a 1-page strategic plan. 1 page. Not 24 by 36, by the way, 1 page, 8.5 by 11, that says here's the strategy for this coming year. Now you can have supporting documents, but everyone knows you should only have to take out 1 sheet of paper and be able to say, okay, here's the plan, and we know exactly what we're going to do. Here's number 1, here's number 2, here's number 3. Very clear, very concise, everyone owns it, that's operational. So if you want to avoid the mistake of being too complicated, come up with a simple plan, and that will get you way ahead of where most people are. Right? You can look at a 1 page every month, but you don't look at a binder every month. Number 2, the second biggest problem is what we call incrementalism. Incrementalism. And that happens because, and this happens all the time by the way, where a business owner or entrepreneur takes a look at this year's plan, which didn't work, and they go, hey, we really ought to finish these things. And so basically they take last year's plan and say, let's do it just a little bit better. Okay? And that's incrementalism. We did this, it didn't work, let's try it again, maybe do it a little bit better. That isn't strategy, and that won't cause you to have a significant growth plan. You want to engage in big ideas. What are those things, and we call them growth accelerators here at Wired to Grow, what are those things that can drive a 5% or greater increase in revenue growth? And if it doesn't do that, it's not a growth accelerator. We've got to look for those ideas, those big, sharp ideas that will allow us to grow significantly, not just kind of go along like this. So if you want to avoid having an incremental mindset, you got to look for those big, sharp right turns, those growth accelerators that are going to get you at least 5% or greater revenue growth. So that's number 2. The third most common one is they often don't establish clear accountabilities to their plans. Now, I see this all the time. You'll see a long list of ideas, but there's no name and no date attached to it. Now, you know just like I do that if there is a long list of things that need to be done and my name isn't next to that, somebody else will get that done. And so that is one of the reasons why year after year plans don't get executed, because everyone's thinking somebody else is going to get it done. That's a terrible way to create a plan. If you have an initiative, there ought to be a name attached to it, and there ought to be a date for when it needs to be completed. And not just that, but there ought to be a review process in place so that during the course of the year, for example, I recommend with my clients that at least every month, at the beginning of the month, they're reviewing what they were supposed to get done for that quarter. And then there ought to be some accountability to that. Okay, Mary, you said that you're going to get this done by the 31st of January. Did you get it done? If not, why not? How are you going to rectify it? Is there anything that we need to do to help you get it done? But there has to be clear accountability for every initiative, and there has to be a review process, and there needs to be some expectation for people to complete it, and some consequences if they don't. So that's number 3. Avoid that by establishing clear accountabilities. The fourth key then is that you want to, the fourth mistake is not creating buy-in. Not creating buy-in. Now, this often happens because business owners and entrepreneurs think, hey, it's my business, right? So I should be the one who drives this. And so they'll tend to create a plan and then tell everybody else, here's the plan. Well, the problem with that is that people tend to own what they help create. So if you're the one who creates it, you're the only one who owns it. But if you get everyone else to own it and you get them to engage in it, the probability of them owning it and making sure that they're going to execute is much higher. If you haven't read Patrick Lencioni's great book on the 5 dysfunctions of a team, you need to read it. Because one of the things he talks about there is the reason why a lot of businesses don't have accountability around results is because at the bottom, the base of this little triangle he creates, is that people really don't trust one another. Because they don't trust one another, they don't engage in good, productive conflict. They don't actually say what they're thinking about. And because they don't really say what they're thinking, they don't really agree. So they might be nodding their head in the meeting going, yeah, boss, that's a great idea. But inside they're going, I don't believe in that. And because they're not committed to it, right? They don't want to hold one another accountable because they don't want to be held accountable to something they actually didn't agree to because they think it's a stupid idea. And so therefore at the top of his pyramid, you don't get the results. So if you haven't read the book, I'd encourage you to do that. But the problem is that they don't create a buy-in. So the solution, of course, is that you want to create buy-in. And that always begins by you, the person at the top, saying, I want the team to do that, and making sure you have the trust and the kind of conversations that are necessary to create a great plan. And that leads us to the fifth and the final one, which is that people often create their plan after they create the budget. Major mistake. Now, this makes no sense to me. You should always create the plan first and then let the budget fit that. But most businesses, and I see this all the time, they create the budget first, whether it's the CEO, the business owner, the CFO, etc. They create the budget, they'll take last year's budget and then have some kind of increase and say, here's your budget to people. And that's a major mistake. You ought to first come up with a plan and then find what kind of resources do we need to complete this plan. So you want to make sure that you're always creating the plan first and then make sure that the budget supports the plan, not that you allow the budget to drive the plan. So those are 5 very common mistakes. So if you want to avoid them, make sure your plan is simple. Make sure that you avoid incrementalism by looking for those growth accelerators. Thirdly, make sure you establish clear accountabilities, name, date, review process, and accountabilities with consequences. Making sure that you always create buy-in, and it's not just you creating the plan alone. And then finally, you make sure that your plan drives the budget, not the reverse. If you do those 5 things, you'll avoid those 5 common mistakes, and you'll have a much better plan and ability to actually accomplish your plan next year. Now, if you'd like some more help on being able to create a great killer plan for next year, I encourage you to check out my course called Double It, which is about how to create a killer growth plan to double your business in the next 12, 24, 36 months. You can get it at www.doubleitplan.com, www.doubleitplan.com, and hopefully you'll check that out. But as always, to your accelerated success, Bruce out.